All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Suzanne Sanger. I'm the Executive Director of the Sunshine Coast Conservation Association. On behalf of the SCCA, Rhizome Up Media, and the Green Film Series, I want to welcome you to our 5th annual World Oceans Day Festival and our 5th presentation in our 2022 NEMO Talk series. The SCCA works in the territories of the Squamish, Shishal, Pliamin, Klahoose, and Homolko First Nations. And I'm zooming in today from Chekwelt, or Gibsons, in Atkatsum Howe Sound. The SCCA is very grateful to the First Nations of this region for stewarding these lands and waters from time immemorial. We honor the reverence the Indigenous peoples have always had for nature and their ancestral and internal connection with these lands and waters. It is in this spirit of connection between all life on our planet that we bring you the World Oceans Day Festival. Every year, people around the world come together to celebrate World Oceans Day. The United Nations designated this day to inform the global public of the impact of human actions on the ocean, develop a worldwide movement of citizens for the ocean, and mobilize and unite the world's population on a project for the sustainable management of the world's oceans. The 2022 theme of World Oceans Day is revitalization, collective action for the ocean. I think after 2 years of COVID, there's been a lot of sort of moving away from each other, and the idea is to bring people back together. So through the sharing of remarkable feature films and short films, talks, and boots on the beach events, we hope to inspire and connect people on the coast with each other and this global movement to raise awareness of the role our ocean plays in our everyday lives and our connection with all living things. Our NEMO Talks series specifically aims to link up people with projects and the people doing the projects to bridge between conservation and restoration groups and initiatives on the Sunshine Coast and beyond. Today, we will hear from John Rowe of the Dead Boats Disposal Society about his work and his group's work doing boat removal and all kinds of other things I'm learning along the South Coast. Diane Sanford, our marine liaison, is here to introduce John. Diane, over to you.
Thank you. Good. I would like to introduce John Rowe, the operations manager of the Dead Boat Disposal Society. I've worked with John over the last 5 years, I suppose it is.
Getting on there.
Yeah, somewhere like that. And we have found that John has been invaluable in his advice and assistance in especially for my focus, which has been eelgrass restoration, in having vessels removed that were located within eelgrass beds, and that we wanted to see that we had removed before we could do restoration work. So John and his organization have been responsible for the removal and disposal of hundreds, probably over hundreds, of derelict vessels on the British Columbia coast, as well as other things, so I'm told. And so with no further ado, I'm very pleased to introduce John Rowe of the Dead Boat Disposal Society. Over to you, John.
Thank you, Diane. It's great to have been working with you for the last 5 years, and happy Oceans Day every Happy Oceans Week. Actually, yeah. I used to make it in a regular celebration, go get drunk for the week. So, you know, but I can't do that anymore. So anyways, so we're here to talk today on just life in general, I guess, our experiences as an organization through the last 27 years and working with the communities and groups and First Nations, governments and things like that over the years. We got started in 1995 in the Gorge Waterway in Victoria. We had moved here from Alberta, and it was during the summer games at that time, and there was no housing was very hard, and just as no different from today, there was nothing to rent. Everybody had turned in their rental units into B&B sort of thing, thinking we're going to cash in on it. So we had the fortunate experience of staying out in the French Creek for almost 3 months that year because there was no housing. So I got introduced to the West Coast way beyond my wildest dreams. You know, it was great. And we moved into Esquimalt that year. I had had a back injury in Alberta, so I was recovering from that, and I took a job downtown in Victoria at the Capital Iron, and we were living up towards the Gorge Tillicum Bridge on the Gorge Waterway, and I looked at that and I thought, well, why not row to work, sort of thing. So I went to my neighbor and got a space to put on the gorge and climbed in and rode back and forth for a number of years, actually. And my son was being homeschooled at the time. My partner Colleen was working teaching in the daytime, and my son would come down at 9 years old down to the bottom of Bay Street Bridge after work and come, and I'd pick him up there. And some past history is I'm from Hamilton, and I saw decline of habitat in my early days and loss of fisheries and things like that, things that you took for granted. And for me, being on the gorge and harbor, it didn't look that bad to me, but it was for a young man at 9 years old, there was especially at low tide, there was a lot of debris on the beaches and stuff like that. There was you name it, shopping carts, batteries, tires, engine blocks, car bodies, boats, fish nets, occasional kitchen sink and things like that. So, but we saw the beauty of it. And so we'd have in the summer months, of course, the spare time. And so in 94, we started pulling out debris along the bank, sort of thing, and just piling it up. Well, it got to be a lot, but winter passed and we started again in 95, and our piles only got bigger. So we got a hold of the media at the time, and actually it was Keith Martin we got a hold of, because even the media didn't want to talk to us, and we weren't aware of the long-term problems with the gorge and harbor in Victoria. We were remotely aware of what was going on, and then anyways, in a very short period of time, we got introduced to the national media. The Japanese were here filming something downtown, and they got wind of our Wesley and I, and we got interviewed on that right on the gorge, and it kind of went international in a big hurry. So we got lots and lots of press instantly right away. The very next day, my phone rang at about 7 o'clock in the morning, and it was a distinguished gentleman here that was a developer, and he was developing part of the gorge, revamping an old industrial site, and he invited us to come down and meet with him and the industrial users of the harbor. So the long and short of it is we went down to that meeting. We sat down. It was one of the most amazing meetings I've ever been into in my life. And, don't trust the developers, but this was a special person. And he said, write down what you think you need to clean this up. So I filled about 5 full scaps of paper, and there was 6 people in that site. He sat down in that meeting, and there was what I didn't know was our industry leaders at the time, but I hadn't a clue. And he said basically to them, handed them the piece of papers and said, I expect an answer by Friday. And we never looked back. It was, we went on from there to form what they call the Veins of Life Watershed Society. And and that was developed from the province's push at the time because of our lost salmon streams. So if you looked at an old BC environment picture, it had a picture of what we call the Sailor Sea now, and there was all these red lines. Well, these red lines were creeks that did not exist anymore. And so my daughter looked at it and said, hold up your arm. And I held up my arm like this. He says, that's the Veins of Life. And so that's where the whole concept of the Veins of Life Watershed Society came from. We formed a fairly substantive board. We had 21 members made out of industry, and local councillors were appointed directly. We have 6 different municipalities that share our watershed, which would be the Colquitts and the Craigflower. So they appointed a councillor to sit on our board, plus Colwood actually got involved at that time too. So we had that, and we had the support of Mo Sahota, and at that time our good friend David Anderson. He was the environment minister, or the fisheries minister at the time. So it took off. We worked with the municipalities. The province formed the youth environment program, and so we went on a campaign of what's the historical information. I started getting educated on that, but the problem with the gorge and harbor was we had a loss of habitat, but we had a loss of habitat from a significant amount of garbage. We started taking out, we ran one of the biggest dive operations for 2 straight years and took out, we came up with just, there was this debate from the scientists, we leave it there as habitat, but we just went down, we took everything out, anything that was human made in there, tires, batteries, chainsaws, construction equipment, shopping carts by the thousands, bottles, hundreds of thousands of bottles in there. And we just went from one end of the Ogden Point right up to the Portage Inlet and took everything out. In the meantime, we had Colquitts in the Craig fire. The waters, particularly in the Colquitts, the waters were too warm. The fisheries had declined in there substantively over the years. And it looked like bath water, gray washing machine water. So we went on a campaign of planting there. We reached out to the farmers, and there was always that debate that it's a ditch, and we called it a creek sort of thing, but we came to an understanding and we planted a lot. We had the youth environment program going. So we had 60 employees, but we also did a source control program where we went down. If you look behind me there's the one on this side here is, that's Cecilia Creek. And then the one in the background is Gorge Kinsman Park. So we work with a Saanich in Victoria and a Esquimalt on we ran a dye testing program. So we went door to door. We did an education program, plus we put dye down the toilet and down all the drains in the house, the outside drains, and see where it went, whether it was flowing into the storm drain or into the sewer or either or. So looking again at source control, we brought down the gorge had declined in both in the herring, but with eelgrass had declined substantively. And so as we're, everyone I know is educated on eelgrass is turbidity and water temperatures that they're really sensitive to. So we, through 4 really large outfalls, that were mainly in the industrial area, we reduced down the fecals, but a lot of the sediments and a lot of the contaminants into it. We brought it down substantively in a long period of time. Part of the goal of society, one of our directors, Ian, came up with the gorge was the waters were swimmable right up to probably about the 40s, and then it got turned around because of septic systems and just poor management, urban runoff, garbage in there, and people turned their backs to it. People did swim in it, but it was not safe to swim in. Sometimes the fecal, even when we got started, it was in the hundreds of thousands, if not millions, in certain areas. So we work with the municipalities a lot of it was cross connections and things like that. So we greatly reduced it down. We brought out a goal of the swimmable waters by the year 2000. We spent a lot of money, both as a society, we raised a lot of money, but the regional and municipal governments spent a lot of money on their infrastructure, over 600 million when we were done. And we had this big swim event. And then myself, I went and retired from society in 2001. But the change was so dramatic in that 5 years of the recovery of particularly the water quality and turbidity, but also the eelgrass. It was staggering. We went out on my birthday in 2001, August the 8th, with my family in the kayaks, which we traditionally did, and paddled up from downtown. And we could not go up the gorge because the eelgrass was so thick at the time. And we had astounding returns in both in coho and herring in those 2 years before that too. It was just absolutely staggering. The change was dramatic and it was noticeable, sort of thing. And so we went on in society. We had thought we had implemented with the municipalities a source control program. So where we stopped, they needed to do some serious infrastructure, and still to this day, serious infrastructure issues on stormwater and urban runoff, particularly in industrial areas. But we have Esquimalt, we have Victoria, and parts of Saanich that are up to 100 years old. And so there's septic systems and everything else are cross-connected. They're actually designed to overflow from the sanitary into the storm drains at high flows. And we experienced that really bad this year again. In those heavy rains we had, everybody says, "Oh, everything's okay." We got a brand new sewer system. We got a brand new sewer treatment plant in, but they didn't deal with the there's too much rainwater. Our sewer plant, our brand new sewer plant, and it hasn't even made the paper to this point yet, but it overflowed. The sewage overflowed in the brand new sewer plant out over the edge and back into the harbor, and in all through our streets in Victoria and Esquimalt and Saanich, all in the lower portions, all the sewer lines all popped their top again, dumping sewage down the roads, sort of thing. So the long and short of it is we tried to implement, but we didn't keep the constant pressure up over the years for the municipalities to actually fulfill their, about 2006, because we had a big change in government, both provincially and federally. They went to this fiscal thing. And so the very first thing they cut was anything related to water quality, period. The city of Victoria brought in what they call a storm water utility, which is what we've been pushing to get implemented for our whole region here. But they left out the water quality end of it. They're more concerned about the rainwater going in the sewer instead of controlling the stormwater and the quality of the storm. The quantity and the quality of the stormwater is how utilities are usually set up. But nobody was there to kind of read the bylaw before they went and put it in place. So they put it in place, saying, oh, great, we're going to deal with stormwater. It's got nothing to do with stormwater. It's all to do with the sanitary, because it overflows all the time, on the streets. In the meantime, I worked for the federal government. Got appointed by David Anderson to become a review officer of Canada under the Canadian Environmental Protection Act. And I served my about 8 years in Ottawa. I didn't really do much there, but I did get educated in the ways of government, sort of thing. Quite really good, actually. I had some good tutors. So I think that was his whole purpose for sticking me there. We had a change of government, very, I don't know what you want to call them, but the environment and fisheries was not even on the horizon. I watched the DFO regulations get diminished. I watched all our groups that are out there that had been established long before I ever came along for salmon enhancement and things like that, diminished to nothing, no funding or anything. All our conservation officers on the ground, they don't exist anymore. So, but we kept on working. My relationship with industry, heavy industry, I moved to Salt Spring in 2006 full time, and I would take on certain projects throughout the coast here, and with heavy industry, we just went and we self-funded it, and we'd go out and do cleanups or restoration, or whenever somebody reached out to us, we'd go and do a certain project. And so we worked from Port Renfrew all the way to Alaska in the last 25, 30 years. The derelict boats, we've done a lot of boats, as I was saying earlier, without really any legal authority to do it. We just kind of got a phone call from a government agency and said, would you deal with this? And we'd make them disappear, sort of thing, in the Harper years and that. So we worked cooperatively. And then, like I say, in 2008, I got a call from the receiver, Rex, the new one that was in there. And he said, we've been working out in the field, and we got a protocol in place. And then 2015, 2016, we had worked in Cabral Bay over the years many times and taken out derelict boats and garbage, but then Cabral Bay suddenly became a breeding ground for all these abandoned boats. So there was 16 or 17 on the beach, and the community association was struggling to get rid of them. No agencies were paying attention to it. So my current Veins of Life board did not want to take the legal responsibility of seizure. So I formed with the Cabral Bay community group, just a singular society, a singular owned society, particularly myself, but we called it a Dead Boat Society, so I could seize the boats, and we removed them. At the same time, Sheila Malkinson was putting on a lot of heat in Ottawa, sort of thing. So it worked out really, really well. And so the federal government came out with the Abandoned Boats program, and out of that, the Dead Boats Disposal Society was formed. And we went on to, we've done 240, I think, so far. The provincial government, we've worked and done, I think, 60 last year, and I'll do another 30 here very shortly with the provincial government. And so we're growing as an organization, but there's, like everything else, there's the growing pains. We, it's expensive, as you know, to work in the marine environment. It's terribly expensive. And then today people don't do anything without, liability insurance and everything else. We used to do a lot of this stuff, just, we just take the risk, where nobody takes any risk anymore. So, your board of directors and everything. So your liabilities, insurance, your lawyers, your everything else, all adds up. So we're like anything else, we're struggling out there. We continue to do the numbers and things like that, but we're on a major shift in our organization. I'm wishing to retire, and yeah, just it's been good year. It's been good lifetime.
Amazing. I mean, it seems like you've pulled off a lot, John, in the course of this. I mean, just from the beginning of your son, was it? Did you
Yeah,
say?
yeah, my son
Yeah,
Wesley.
the garbage on the beach, and then all the way to here. I mean, you just said 60 boats.
Yeah, it's again, I've been always the talking head, but I've always had the board of directors and friends that I've made over the years, like working with Nikki and working with Diane and working with all these other groups. We grew. We got to the point that, do we need government money? Probably not if we get my act together, sort of thing, but we want to continue building. I've always been an advocate for the green economy, the blue green economy sort of thing. We got to employ people to do this, not just allow little non-profits. Diane and I talked a bit about it yesterday, and I know Nikki, but they're throwing out money and everybody's going at it, sort of thing, and the tooth and nails come out, and you lose those contacts because you got the contract and we didn't get the contract and things like that. We got to turn this into jobs, not just what they're doing to us right now in this ocean protection plants. I look at it, and I've said it to the minister directly to her, is it's a joke. Actually, there's nothing in here. There's no plan. There's just, we'll throw out a little bit of money and we'll see what we can get, and we'll appease this organization or that organization. But there's no plan. I don't see it anywhere. I'm sorry to say, I'm really disappointed.
It really does sort of bring us back to the whole purpose of these conversations that we're trying to have right now is to connect people up, to see who's doing what, and then leverage each other's capacity and that kind of thing, right? And so I feel like I keep saying in all the different conversations that I'm having that the restoration economy is the new economy. I mean, as climate change worsens, as we're seeing all the damage that's coming down. I mean, how $9 billion is how much the transfer that's going to come to BC after the atmospheric rivers and the flooding damage. So there should be money to, support this emerging economy to
I hope so. I'm on a campaign to kind of raise that awareness. Once we get these new contracts started, it'll give me the freedom to get back into the press and start really getting it going. I went and lived through this in the 90s. They had the displaced fishermen's program. There was $500 million to be spent on this coast. Well, I can tell you, less than 100 million was spent over 5 years. The rest of it just disappeared into Ottawa, into coffers, sort of thing. I was so disappointed not to turn that into an industry with the fishermen and things like that. The First Nations, even at that time, were quite interested, and we work with a lot of them to this day. And you'll see these monies, but are they actually on the ground doing work? You were talking about and how sound there, and you got to have a plan, but you don't need to get to the plan like forest renewal, where the plan is actually spend all your money. You want to actually be out planting trees or stopping sediments and things like that. So
yeah.
this is where we're missing the ball. It was just replying to, I don't know if you saw it, Canada's greenhouse gas offset credit systems, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a substantial way to raise money for ocean restoration. There's not one single mention in their release documents, one thing about oceans at all, about eelgrass and the value of carbon credit, trading carbon credits, sequestering and eelgrass and kelp. We know we can weigh to the infinite degree of what that does. We need more eelgrass. We need more kelp. It reduces down it absorbs carbon tenfold of what trees does, sort of thing. But if you look online, there's not one mention on gas offset carbon credit tradings. Is it the end solution? No, but it gives us a start for an industry to pay for the materials and pay for the equipment and things like that. Yeah. So.
And John, if anybody has a question, please just raise your hand. Feel free to put something in the chat if you want me to ask the question for you, but I'm just gonna keep going. It's really easy to roll off of everything that you're saying. So I'm going to do one more question, Billy, before I call on you. And it is with the carbon thing. Like it feels like, John, you've been able to work with industry and sort of not rely on government money. And so my question goes, how do you get industry to pay for this stuff?
It's not like industries. My philosophy is I with my friends at Realmax, I've never asked them for money, nor have they given. I mean, I got a couple of computers from them last year out of 30 years of working together, but because of my background in industry, I can go out and source those monies. I can get them either privately. I got caught up with the Harper thing on on taking money out of the United States out of these big foundations. Well, fortunately, I wasn't tax charitable, so there was nothing they could do to me, but they made our lives miserable. They made my board life miserable and everything. They audited me about 6 times in our business. I've had a family business for 40 years, sort of thing. And they've audited that to no nth degree. It's getting those relationship, and we had the beauty of working when the teams we're first started to take the young people off the streets. It was a disaster. It did not work. I did not have even remotely the idea of their issues, and a lot of it was hunger and safety and things like that, and things that we couldn't deal with. So it didn't end. But then Richard Hebda started the natural systems course at the same time, and so it became almost lock and step that if you're gonna graduate from Richard Hebda, you come and served with the Veins of Life either as a volunteer or a paid staff member. So we had some brilliant people particularly young ladies through our door that were just brilliant. And I'm a stubborn old guy. I was stubborn and old back then, and they'd explain the sciences to me in a way I could understand, sort of thing. So it's developing those relationships and learning the ability to raise money. How do you ask for people for money? It's a learned process, and you can teach people how to do this, but we need to create a small institute to where we take our best of their best and put them through a 2-year course with. I know lots of groups out there that would, just if you had one person, Nikki, and we're all getting old, how do you pass this information along? We need to train people to professionally do this, but also be able to work in the field. And so it's that next leap that we hopefully can make, that we don't need government in this. We just don't. We need to come out as a community, or the province of BC. Government will be at the table, of course. You'll never get rid of them, but let's start making our own decisions in our local regions. It really is, and just continue. The measurement is how much you've gotten done, sort of thing. It really is, whether it's source control or planting trees or fisheries or eelgrass or garbage removed. It's all weighable, and people will buy into it with the right program. But again, like I say, with the ocean protection or the ocean, they're dividing up all these small organizations, and now nobody's talking to each other because we're going after the same funds. Well, go to it. I'll still be here. We're not going anywhere. You get it. Give us a call when you got something big. It's here and there. It's.
Hey, Billy, you had a question?
Yeah, John, I'm just so amazed at the work that you've done around dealing with storm and sewage kind of stuff going into the ocean. And it's something that, always sort of sits in the back of my mind about when I live in Roberts Creek. Yep. And I'm just like, I have absolutely no knowledge of how all of that's being dealt with along the coast, and whether there's any kind of, really good plans, or, whether Seashell has a plan or Gibson's has a plan, or whether we have the proper kinds of, facilities to deal with that stuff. And I don't know, it's just, sorry, I'm not really asking you a good question, but I'm just saying.
I get you. I get what you're saying. No, I do understand. And I can explain. If you look behind me, there's, like I say, that's the drainage for the Gorge Kinston Park into the gorge. And the one behind me there, that one is for Cecilia Creek, which is it's shared by Saanich. And so again, I was in the fortunate place at the right time in the CRD. Is the Fishermen's Union of all things sued the regional and provincial and federal governments on the outfalls, right? in Victoria because they were discharging sanitary sewage directly into the Juan de Fuca.
Yeah.
The byproduct of this is that they had no data. So the province forced the regional government here to create a stormwater testing program. And so they created that about a year before I got started. So they go out and they sample every outfall in the CRD every single year, sometimes twice a year, depending on what it is. It's a baseline data. So that gives me as a private citizen that ornament. So
Right.
I've worked in the Fraser River and tried to get this implemented, but it failed because of a change of government, both provincially and federally. But you got to place the onus on the municipality owns the pipes basically, and anything that comes out of the end of the outfall, they can be sued for. And that's one thing you got to remind them all the time, that if it comes out of the end of the pipe and I find it's metal, mercury or zinc or anything else, I can launch a multi-million-dollar lawsuit against them. That's the first conscious thing. It's a constant threat out there, but we don't use that tool enough to do it. So I only aware of one other municipality in the whole BC that actually monitors their stormwater, and it's Comox because of the First Nations up there. But they only do it like once every 4 or 5 years. But we need to take what we have in the CRD and implement that throughout the whole district. We need to start. The boats are a glorious thing. The dead boats, it gets a lot of smiles and it brings in the money and things like that. But my focus is on water quality, and the water quality we're suffering from in BC is what's coming out of our outfalls and running off our agriculture and industry, and just your standard home sort of thing, people washing their cars in the streets and stuff like that. It all adds up in the future. And we do not have a plan. And this is where our water quality is dropping dramatically. We're not seeing the oils that we used to see, but we're still, if you start doing the measurements, you can see the heavy metals and the fecals and things like that. And the problem with fecals is one time it was quite acceptable for high fecal levels for the fisheries. Fish will still live in there, but it's all that other drugs that are in it now that are the mystery. And we're learning more and more and more about that all the time and how it's affecting our fisheries. And you again, like derelict boats or tires or batteries, you got to stop it from going in the first place. Cigarette butts, it drives me crazy, cigarette butts, right? Just absolutely insane cigarette butts, but you too, it just, but we do nothing about it. We don't hold the industry responsible, There should be a fund in there that we send out people and they pick up. I could fill at one time a 45-gallon drum in the morning in the gorge at one time. We got it down because of better storm drain management, but just cigarette butts alone,
I have to put in my plug. I have to put in my plug for eelgrass. So there's a study that has been within the last year from Indonesia talking about the function of eelgrass in filtering out various pollutants from the waters where it exists, where it grows, and including fecal coliform. So yeah, interesting study.
Yeah.
Well, and Diane, you raised the question. Leanne's got a question in the chat, but I'm just going to follow up on what you just said and link it back around again, is that, if the water quality is terrible in the creeks and then it hurts the eelgrass, and then we don't have that function of filtering it, right? Like, so it's this loop that is terrible. So Leanne was asking, she says, the SCRD doesn't take responsibility for any outfalls, only Gibsons and Seashell do that. The SCRD claims they have no jurisdiction. How do we deal with that? I think that's onto the stormwater.
Yeah, that's exactly what the problem is that the CRD does the monitoring, and they're desperately tried to cancel this in 2006 when nobody was watching. Fortunately, I was in Ottawa at the time, sitting at the minister's desk, and I got an email. We ended that discussion in within the day sort of thing. All of a sudden, the CRD was back on to doing the stormwater testing and haven't quit it yet. The politicians in the municipalities want it to disappear because I can use it every year. I'll get up and speak before them, and every year it's the same thing. It's gotten worse instead of better, and so yeah, Leanne is right. The CRD has no legal authority. It's the municipal government, and it's forced by both the federal government, but particularly the Municipal Act, discharge out of outfalls. So the municipal governments are solely responsible for what comes out of the end of pipes, period. Is it enforceable? It is through the DFO, through the Fisheries Act, but nobody seems to enforce it. When Diane was saying about the eelgrass, because our harbor in Victoria was supposed to be divested years ago, right? But the problem is the contaminant that was existing, historical, and it's still the contaminant going out. But it's an area that they've studied to death. They've literally gone in and done the sciences of sediments and everything else. And when we reduced down the turbidity and got the water quality back up in certain areas of the upper inner harbor, the eelgrass came back. And so they went back in and sampled it 20 years later. And guess what? The heavy metals and everything have gone down substantively. They've either, solution to pollution is dilution, but it dissipated out into the further. So there's areas in there that actually are technically, you could reopen the shellfish if it wasn't for fecal, in areas that were heavy metals. So it's astonishing. It does work, but it takes a long, long period of time.
Wow. Does anybody else have a question, or do you mind if I ask again? Sorry. I have a million questions. John, earlier in our conversations before the meeting, you were talking to me about storm scepters and rain gardens, about, to address source area contamination or source contamination. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, storm scepter is just a product that actually you put at either in the pipe or the end of pipe, or in off a parking lot or an industrial lot or several lots together, sort of thing. It's a concrete product that you put in. The water comes in. It's designed to catch the first 20 minutes of that flash rain that we get, the freshet sort of thing. That's where you'll get your most pollutions from, the metals and the particulates and the oils and everything else. What it does is go in this great big chamber and swirls it around. The sediments settle to the bottom, the oils stay at the top, and then the waters are discharged out back into the environment, whether it's the stream or the marine habitat sort of thing. We've done, I think, 6 in total bioremediation ponds and reclamations, but each one of them over a period of 25 years have failed. And it failed because we didn't put in place a catchment area of the storm scepters or similar product. There's quite a bit of products out there, but storm scepter I can easily describe because we've used it before. But we didn't put in stopping the sediments and the oils and everything else before it entered into the bioremediation area or the ponds. And then, of course, there's a maintenance on the ponds. So these ponds were built in industrial areas and in commercial or parking lots for malls and things like that. There was no requirement to maintain them. So part of a maintenance of a bioremediation is if you got cattails in there, they have to be harvested and tested and disposed of correctly. And depending on the loading, the sediment's got to come out and you got to start all over again. None of that has happened. So you're seeing the areas that we actually put the bioremediation in, they're actually gone beyond their load and they're now polluted again like they were originally in the first place. So it's again, it's source control, stopping it at a source, which with storm scepters, you can actually dip the sediments on a more regular basis to see where the contaminant and narrow that field down for where that pollution is coming from. Anyways.
Yeah. No, it's like looking for solutions. So I feel like you're offering ideas for solutions to address some of these things that a lot of people have no clue about, and even local governments. Leanne's got her hand up.
Yeah, I'm just onto this jurisdictional thing because we have seen massive erosion and environmental damage as a result of storms here.
Yep.
Over half of our population lives in rural areas on septic tanks, and nobody does anything about it.
No.
And all claiming no jurisdictional authority. Now, I'm just thinking about that and going, wait a minute, is this something that we could be, where to target our activity to get some responsibility?
I could speak to that. I dealt with this in several jurisdictions all the way up the coast here. So if you look at your regional governments and their storm drain or septic tanks, they have the legal right to inspect and they have the legal right to enforce in septic tanks, period. It's every single one of them, every one that I've read, probably about 18 different regional districts. They all have the response. We have this in the in Saanich in particular. So we have an huge urban area with a lot of septic tanks on our streams, and it shows up in our streams. Alkin Beaver Lake per se, we get too much blue-green algae and things like that, and so it's one of my most favorite topics, urban runoff. So the stinky subject. Anyways, so in Saanich, even in Saanich, it's the real role of the municipality, but it's actually the regional government that has the enforcement capability in the municipality of Saanich. But the regional government has no authority over the storm drain in the regional government or in the municipal government. How that makes sense, but every single regional government all are supposed to take care of the septic tanks. So this is what happened in the early 70s is our federal government did not have the resources nor wanted to take the responsibility for our fisheries. So they did blanket closures of our shellfish industry for harvest in the whole southern end of the island. And it was for the simple reasons they couldn't make the federal or the provincial government abide by the rules of septic tanks, period. So they didn't want to get caught into it. They just closed everything. Try to reopen an area that's closed to shellfish. It's damn near impossible. It really is. If they had stepped up to the plate as a federal government that's supposed to manage our fisheries, including our shellfish, they would have said to the regional government or the province, say, you clean up your act or we're going to come in and do it for you. And the simple threat would have been there, but oh no, they took the easy way out and said, well, you guys don't want to do anything? Well, just close it all. You can't harvest without deprecation. So that's how they got away with it in BC. That is the complete difference to Washington State, where Washington State government is all over you. If you have a leaky septic tank or a storm drain or anything else, they'll come on. They'll be there within the day to deal with it. I have areas throughout this region of I was up in Comox there, but even in our CRD, way too much money. And storm drains along the streets and everything else in the urban areas with septic tanks that the fecals that are in the hundreds of millions, right off the scale sort of thing. And it ain't from their cows because none of them have them. So, yeah.
I have a question about that, John. Have you heard about there's a Washington State has come up with a report on the residues from roadways, especially those brand new, after a first rain, the first wash on that roadway, and the material from the tires of vehicles is killing fry.
Yep.
And
we've known about this for a long period of time. I started out as a commercial diver and I went down and I volunteered. My family has always owned real estate in Florida up until Trump got in, sort of thing. And now none of them do. So I'd go down there as a kid and I took up diving and I watched them put the tires in. And then 20 years later, I helped them take a big chunk of them out because of that singular issue. Everything was dying. It was whatever contained in now is hormone disruptors.
That's
what they contain in the tires. We've known that. So the thing is, we know in tires, they've gotten better quality. Our engines are not polluting that blue smoke, but it's what's being burnt in the fuel that you're going to be. Canada got involved with their free trade action. And then the US government turned around and sued our government because we demanded to know from the gasoline companies what they were putting in additives in their fuel. The Americans won in that one, saying that it was none of our business under their patent laws. So we had no idea. Now the sciences are coming out and they're showing what it's actually, that good clean gasoline that it leaves no carbon in your engine. Well, where does it go? It doesn't magically disappear, it ends up on your road. And it's it's worse than oil ever was. Oil's bad, but the stuff that's coming out of these tires and brake pads, like the types of light metals and things like that, are just absolutely astounding. Astounding.
Yeah, this is a tire additive, apparently, something to prolong the life of the tire. And quite devastating.
I think I've mentioned to you, and I think I've sent it over to that professor in England that's working on the discharge of glass reinforced plastics breaking down in the marine environment, particularly from vessels and things like that. But in Brighton, their whole 10,000 years of shellfish harvest disappeared about 10 years ago, and they couldn't figure out why. And it was the breakdown of the resins in the fiberglass, the glass reinforced plastics, that caused a hormone disruptor. It doesn't allow the oysters to switch from male to female. And then I was at a meeting online the other day, and I brought this up, and somebody chirped up that they're showing that in the Chinook too,
Mhm. Mhm.
not allowing to switch once they get out into the ocean. So anyway, scary stuff.
Yeah, this maybe that's back to the boats and the removal. And earlier on in the conversation, you said that some people say leave some of the debris at the bottom because it leaves habitat, and then other people say get it all out. And you're of the mind of get it all out.
Don't put it in.
What I learned through a development application, years ago, about the substance called tributyl tin that's in boat paint that got scraped off the boats and fell into the sediments and is like 14 times more toxic than mercury, and it has that same effect. And I think you said you were involved in a remediation.
Yes, in Esquimalt when I first got started, I learned what a nanny-toad was. I had not a clue when I first got started, and I got involved with you, Vic, and the regional government. Laura Taylor was in charge of our conservation end in the regional government here, and they started looking into nanitodes, and they were dual sexes sort of thing, so they were male and female. It takes hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years for that to happen by nature. But the other thing is that we go on about recycling plastics and things like that. Well, we're showing with our boats, we now have to sample them before we can dispose of them. And part of it, our thing is, I insist that we test for tributylin. Well, it'd be surprising about 20% of them show up, and even in small sailboats, even though it's been banned since the 75. What I saw is that our industries are so small here, and so we got our bases, particularly that the graving docks and things like that, the bigger yards have been using tributylin, and they had it tucked away, and so Uncle Louis would steal 5 gallons of it, give it to so and so, and they mix their own concoction of it. So it's showing up in boats in the early 80s that we still that we're pulling out, that are built in the 50s and 60s, but they still shows up in that. So the problem was you just can't go and recycle that anymore. You actually physically have to cut the bottom part from the top part, which adds up the cost, and the disposal costs are just staggering when you start showing that up in the keels and stuff like that. It just it gets painted onto lead and things like that, and it immerses itself in lead. Well, you just can't throw the lead into the smelter anymore. It's got to go through a process, so yeah, it's nasty.
Yeah. Sure nasty. So let's see, does anybody else have any questions?
I have a quick one that seems simple but might be more complicated. I was wondering, for the average person here on the Sunshine Coast, what are ways that they can help?
Reach out to Diane. For ours is identification. Where is this stuff? That's what we have a whole brand new website up, but our agencies just don't they pretend to know, and that's the problem, is they don't know their data. They have less data than the majority of the private citizen really don't. So what we do is, it makes a very hard argument for if you got abandoned docks, you got we deal with a lot of large debris out there. There's lots of good community cleanups dealing with plastic bags and garbage and things like that. We'll take all the big stuff, but we don't know where it is, so we can't budget for it. It takes us up to 2 years to be able to put a plan together. So Howe Sound in particular, we have a general idea of where some of the abandoned boats are. For COVID has slowed us down and where some of the debris is, but report it to the respective agencies, which currently is the Coast Guard, and I had to report old abandoned docks and everything else to them. They don't like it, but report it anyways, and then inform us where it is. And that way it makes it very hard for the politicians. I get to speak to committees. It's been slow because of COVID, at least twice a year, whether it's federally or provincially sort of thing. And I don't have to even speak anymore. I just have it playing in the background here instead of a spreadsheet or whatever. Now I just put a video on in the back of all the debris that's we've seen and haven't taken out or are taking out, sort of thing. I don't really need to say anything after that. It goes to prove our case. But that's where we're lacking on that information and that data of what is out there. And if we don't know
Oh.
what's out there, there's never going to put a plan in place. We're never going to make these agencies responsible for them.
So this is a prime example, though, John, of how this does work, because with our project, we're in the last year of our 5-year project. One of the first things we did was side scan sonar of the Porpoise Bay end of Seashell Inlet. And Nikki, who's the executive director of Sea Change Marine Conservation Society, knows John and said, okay, Diane, you need to meet John and show him this information, because our capacity was only to remove small stuff. So you may have seen in the past some of these wonderful pictures of the old sewing machine and things like that we were able to deal with. But she said, if you any big stuff that we've got, that we've come across, talk to John about it, right? And so when within the eelgrass range, because that was our focus. So when we found something such as a vessel that was too big for our crane to deal with, I would talk to John. We did a couple of little tours, it seems to me, looking around from the shorelines and pointing at areas, but we actually mapped the debris. Okay, and so that's what our basis was for our beginning work. And then parlayed on to John saying, okay, John, there's this vessel we would love to get out of here. Because it's in eelgrass, it's too big for us. We don't have capacity. And so John facilitated getting a couple of vessels removed that were for us crucial. And it was just great, because it turned out the band was involved because they had funds, and that Transport Canada was involved because they were the actual ones that had spoken to the band, and John actually facilitated getting the vessels removed. And so it was a great collaboration.
Yeah, you speak of that map. You gave it to me, and I flew to Ottawa and spoken to committee, and I put that up on the back of my wall and explained, all those little dots and everything were something. They were talking about, oh, we're just going to take this boat out and do this boat. And I said, well, to get into Saanich Inlet or Seashell Inlet is a journey in itself, and the expense and everything else. We're going to put a crane and a barge and everything else in there. Let's take it all at one time. We'll work with Nikki and the crew, and still trying to get that methodology of thinking through our agencies that, we can work together. And there's lots of work. I figure there's probably 15 years of work if we just put a crew of at least 30 to 60 people in the province, from coast one end of the coast to the other, and just never stop working, sort of thing, just to catch up,
It's true. It's true.
15, 20 years. So anyways,
Very
but
true.
no, it's that information that is valuable to us.
Yeah. But getting back just 2 seconds,
Yep.
Kylie, to your question, what can an individual do? Quit using the ocean as a garbage dump. It's brutal. It is
Birth
brutal.
control.
You go to a marina, or you go to a public dock, and it's like a garbage dump. It's like it's out of sight, out of mind. And I think that's number one. It's prevention. Let's try to prevent this from happening. We know better. Back in the day, they used to take boats that were burning or derelict, and they would pull them out and they'd sink them. And that's how they dealt with them.
They still do, actually.
Well,
Just don't see it as much.
well, we don't like to hear that. But yeah, and so we have to change that mentality.
Yeah.
We have to change that way of thinking of our ocean as a place we can dump it, because it's out of sight, out of mind.
I feel like we had action items, or hopeful action items, out of this conversation. The first thing, what you just said, Diane, is, stop treating the ocean like it's your garbage can. Like, there's an opportunity to work with, like, the Sontag Marine Education Center, and then other groups further up the coast, and the Biosphere Initiative, to really do some kind of communications piece for the marinas around, your garbage affects things, so there's that. There's a communications thing. There's also like you said, that the Porpoise Bay has been mapped for debris. So mapping of debris. Has the whole inlet? Obviously not, but I mean, is it possible somehow to map the inlet for the debris and map the fjord, the Howe Sound fjord?
It's on our agenda this year to start doing it. We've gotten some bid in for some serious equipment. We're going to buy it regardless. And yeah, my intention is to start working with Diane and everything else to, I should have moved there 5 years ago when I had the opportunity. Let's put it that way. But anyways, we'll get there. We'll get there sooner. but yeah,
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah. I keep inviting him up and giving him, you know, little road
teasers.
shows so he can see the place.
Okay, that's good. Okay, well, I like, let us know how we can support.
Yeah.
And John, do you want to, like, so I feel like for anything Seashell Inlet related, Diane is our point person.
Yep.
And for, you know, House Sound, I'm always sort of, you know, encouraging people to contact the Biosphere and Ruth and the gang. But when it comes to like this work specifically, can people just contact you? Do you have an
Yep.
email address?
Yeah, just, you know, go on to we got our Facebook site, and now we got a brand new website up now, just actually got it started today. There's some errors in there, but it's again the communications and education. It really is. With COVID in particular, I live on Salt Spring and I see the changes in less than 5 years on our, so we have a brand new people with a lot of money bought up our waterfront and they moved here from regions that really don't value their waterfront. They might have a cottage somewhere and stuff like that, and they got forced into it years ago. But there's that whole, I call it the better homes and gardens syndrome sort of thing. It's got to make everything square and pretty sort of thing, and our oceans are not square and they're not pretty. And so I've seen more of it now, destruction of habitat along the shoreline, which is for our fishers is crucial. The destruction of the dumping of debris over the banks again. I thought we had dealt with that years ago, but the number of in our gorge and harbor here, the number of people cutting their lawns and just throwing it over, you know.
We had so the series of NEMO talks had, you know, different topics, and we were trying to sort of connect them all or show how they're all connected to each other. One of the talks was the District of Seashell has foreshore development permit areas, and so we, you know, the staff came and talked to us about how they're you know, how they're implementing those DPAs and trying to encourage waterfront property owners through development, but also, you know, looking for ways to encourage people, even not through development, to do more green shoring and taking care of that. And then, yeah, so this is I mean, it all just sort of links back.
I know it's a money and resources, but our best results were always door-to-door campaigns. We'd go out and, you know, start on a Saturday morning and start talking to neighbors all the way around, talking to the farmers. That was because I come from a farm. I found it really easy. I have a picture of us with 30 people. I show it every once in a while, all these officials and everything else. And then where's John and the farmer? They're off already in the field doing their thing and making deals, you know, sort of thing. It's just, you know, that's where it all happens. The change happens by discussion, and discussion is usually a neighborly thing. You go up and knock on the door and say, you know, we see you're brand new to the area, and this is we care about our bird population or fish population or whatever. You moved here because of this. You know, sometimes you got to remind them that you come into a different place on the planet, and we've been trying to protect it for years. And it's that education thing. And once they catch on to it, it doesn't take very long. It really doesn't. They're all of a sudden, you know, there's the new disciples, as I call them. So yeah.
That's awesome. I like that. Yeah, I think, and it's a really positive way too, is really recognizing that once people are aware of what they're doing and how it can inadvertently cause harm, most people don't want to cause harm. They want to like do better. So yeah. I really appreciate it. I'm just looking at the time, realizing, you know, we've gone beyond our hour. And so just thinking maybe we'll wind up the talk at this point. It's really interesting to hear all the work you're doing, John, and every, you know, on all the different, you know, aspects of the pollution that's caused by the debris. It's whether it's even on the land and getting into the streams and then into the marine environment, or the stuff that we put in the ocean. It's
where I spend the majority of my time. You know, when we get going, we have staff and everything dealing with the boats and everything, and I just, other than the politics in reaching out, I still deal with stormwater. That's my singular focus in life, is that if we don't stop what's going in, we're screwed as a nation or a world sort of thing. We just got to stop it from going in.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the next talk, is going to be all about stormwater with you. We'll have to engage you on this project that we're working with the nation and MOTI and DFO on the Checkwelt Gibson's Creek, and maybe how we can
positive.
fix some things in advance. So I'm going to do, I just want to say thanks to everybody. Thank you obviously John and Diane for all the work that you do, but also to the SCCA. We have this amazing World Oceans Day working group that has spent a lot of time developing this program and the festival to, connect everybody and inform people about, how we can do better with the oceans and ourselves. And especially Diane, of course, who's in the working group, and Angela, and Billy, and Rise 'em Up Media and the Green Film Series. Billy's done a huge amount of work to create the festival website and manage all of that, and also to curate a whole host of wonderful feature films and short films that can help inspire and connect people through that imagery that I think, for those of us who aren't divers or don't spend a lot of time on the water, the films are a really great way to help introduce people to the beauty of what's under there, and sometimes the not so beauty that's under there. So as a reminder, all of our films are available on the website until the end of day on June 10th, which is Friday, tomorrow. Not everything will remain up on the website forever, but some of it will. So the hope with this website is that it can be an ongoing resource that people can come back and listen to these talks and hear about what you're up to and make those connections. And we'll put links to your website on the YouTube channel when we post the event. And last but not least, our next NEMO talk coming up tomorrow is about glass sponge reefs. And Danielle Derrick will talk to us at noon tomorrow about the Fisheries and Oceans How Sound Glass Sponge Reef Initiative. So, and I'm sure we'll be wondering about how do the dead boats, affect the reefs as well. So maybe you can come.
I was involved with that at one time too, with Dr. Bill Austin.
Oh, right on. Okay.
Cool.
Everyone and everything connected.
But just
Right.
fun. And lots of good people over the years. I've had a really good life at this, and lots of ups and downs, but we're making progress somewhat. So I think, I hope.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Yeah. Thanks, John. I will be in touch.
These kids. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.